Thank you, Anthony, for the invitation to speak today, and thanks to all of you for your interest in this presentation, including those of you out there in virtual land. I'm going to address some ideas and questions with possible answers that have been enthusing me about the Gawler Craton for over 30 years of exploration and collaborative research. I have no problem with persistence as long as you are learning and moving forward. In that regard, there are some themes that I would like you to keep in mind as I relate these ideas. My first motto is, yesterday's paradigm is today's dogma. An example is the very successful targeting of IOCGs with gravity anomalies. However, that approach needs refreshing if the state is to maintain a rate of significant discoveries at about $180 million expenditure per discovery, as is the Western world average according to Richard Schoddy. The opportunity to do this is there because, another quote, an exploration belt is only as mature as the last idea. I believe discoveries are still to be made under our feet, that is, even and especially in brownfields belts. And thirdly, even small deposits can raise serious questions about our models, methods and potential opportunities. And that is true of the Paris silver discovery, standing at about 700,000 ounces gold equivalent. You might say, so what? We are enjoying another boom, so let the money flow and do more of the same. I disagree, as South Australia's exploration expenditure will continue to be at 2.5% of the national spend, which is well below our size and potential. We have to think harder and turn the next level of discovery challenges into opportunities. So today I am updating and integrating three relatively new concepts. Firstly, the Olympic Mega Metallogenic Event, or OME, with an expanding spectrum of deposit styles. Secondly, a unifying Super Caldera setting with a belt-wide marker horizon. And thirdly, a simple zircon-based whole rock pathfinder that provides an agnostic target vector. I propose these can be combined into research and targeting strategies that can be widely applied to the 15-19 million year Gawler Craton. I will validate the concepts in the data-rich Stuart Shelf, where a 2013 study by the survey provides a good platform to do so, and make some recommendations at the end to lead us into the discussion session. I farmed Aberfoyle into Menini Dam in 1988 as a BHT deposit. The lead isotope said so. That was the dogma at the time. We found the other 85% of the Menini resource, were about to become the biggest explorer around Broken Hill, and found Angus using BHT concepts. Aberfoyle was awarded 1992 National Explorer by the Register of Australian Mining for those discoveries along with Minderee. So what could go wrong? An early sign that all was not well with the BHT model was the discovery of the alunite rhyolite breccia at what I named Nankivel Hill, 50 kilometres west of Menini. Also, Menini became a platform for geochemical shootouts as an example of a blind deposit. However, conventional soil geochem worked best, and Menini had a blinder of a Landsat anomaly, also seen at Nankivel and Peterlumbo Hill. As we progressively drilled Menini to the south, things went haywire, with the appearance of a lot of intrusives and breccias initially interpreted as post-Min disruptions. Two of those holes will be displayed after the workshop. In 1993, I was sitting on a fence of RC holes trying to resolve the south end when the lights went on and I realised the hole was drilling through a subvolcanic heterolithic hydrothermal breccia, like the one I was familiar with at the Ardlethan tin deposit in New South Wales. The model and exploration tactics changed overnight. The GRV was part of the mineral system. Spectral mapping and soil geochem became viable search techniques. It raised the questions as early as 1994 of whether Menini was part of the OD event or whether there was a Mid-GRV stratigraphic marker connecting the deposits. Since that time, I've taken three other companies into the district and particularly to Nankivel pursuing epithermal deposits, resulting in the discovery of the Paris silver deposit with soil geochemistry in 2011. The Paris-Nankivel system is an example of the potential for an expanding spectrum of OD-age deposits. A precursor subduction monzogranodiorite is overprinted by all the elements of an epithermal porphyry system as seen on the Silito diagram. A lithocap, propylitic and advanced argillic alteration, a copper-gold skarnded Helen, and the Paris intermediate sulfidation silver deposit. 3 200-metre RC holes were drilled into the porphyritic alteration at Nankivel in 2018. However, this determined any porphyry vein deposit is likely to be 300 to 1,000 metres deeper in the system. Collaborative dating has also connected the different deposits. Precise dating of the Paris dike samples by Justin Payne showed both the precursor Hiltaba granite ages for early dikes and the 1590 million year age for Olympic Dam for the Sin-Min fluorite dike phase. Secondly, coarser argon dating of the Nankivel alunite by the Geological Survey incorporates the 1590 OD age. And unpublished dating of the Nankivel Monzo granodiorite confirmed the anticipated St. Peter's age of around 1620 million years. So, with identical ages for mineralisation either side of the 300 kilometre wide GRV massif, the question was, what are the connections between these deposits? One clue was the precise dating of the GRV done by Liz Jagodzinski, whereby the Batali rhyolite surrounding Paris is dated as being at the transition between the lower and upper GRV. This was the first evidence of a regional trigger for the OME deposits. This is also consistent with current thinking about the rapid formation of magmato-hydrothermal deposits such as porphyry coppers. Regional support for the Mid-GRV marker was recognised with Dave Hopton in 2015 at the Red Lake prospect near Punt Hill, where a 22-metre thick unit of conglomerate logged in 1981 by Chris Giles consists of angular volcanic clasts and rounded quartzite cobbles. It is probably ignebritic and needs more study. The marker is recognised in 3 adjacent holes and thickens towards the north. It represents a major tectonic uplift with exposure of basement north of the holes and is likely upper limit of the OME mineralisation. The marker is associated with sporadic hematite, fluorite and tourmaline alteration indicative of a simultaneous hydrothermal event. The majority of the copper is in magnetite alteration beneath the basement unconformity. At that point in 2018, I left Investigator and have had the luxury of applying much of my time to taking what was learned from Paris-Nankivel and updating this with the latest research developments into a new targeting paradigm for the 1590 Gawler Craton. While the EFTF and the MinEx-CRC attentions were elsewhere, I decided to run my own mini uncover exercise in the Gawler Craton. The first thing was to simplify the complex national research roadmaps into something more specific and understandable for the Gawler Craton. This Venn diagram shows the data inputs for the key disciplines covering mineral systems. However, tying all the inputs together needs experience to ask the right questions and to remodel the framework. Without local knowledge, experience, lines of evidence and questions, there is a risk the innovation hub becomes an innovation gap. It is certainly an area where investors fear to tread and usually needs financing separate to the usual commercial avenues. Geoscience Australia has done an excellent job in breaking down this resistance by integrating the Northern Australian EFTF program and encouraging exploration companies to test ideas in Greenfield's elephant country. Here is the resulting diagram for the Hiltaba and GRV space, infilled with the latest research ideas that are iterated with 30 years of exploration in the area. Similar research themes are colour-coded and are underlined where initiated or supported by Aberfoyle, MIM and Investigator. I will now describe the outcomes of the subsequent thinking. So back to 2020 and the testing of the Caldera model in the Explore SA competition. The Mid-GRV marker identified at Red Lake supports the model of a caldera margin forming within the GRV stratigraphy at 1590 million years. Using the survey mapping, the margin is interpreted by the draping of the lower GRV and marker onto the basement highs to the northeast. Of immediate interest and support for the caldera model is the partitioning of the hematite IOCGs, which are up on the shoulders, whereas the magnetite-dominated deposits are within the caldera, presumably due to hotter conditions under a thicker GRV blanket. This is also true for the relationships between the magnetite-hosted Acropolis and hematite-hosted Olympic Dam IOCGs to the north. John Horonsky always claimed OD was on a horse. I add that it is on a caldera shoulder. Using the survey study drill holes, a composite section was constructed running from Red Lake, then Winjabi, in the caldera up onto the shoulder towards Emmy Bluff and onto Camp Sim and Carapatina. I named the MIM Graben because of that company's unsuccessful holes that found the Graben in the early 90s. The Emmy Bluff fence had to be corrected and raised due to a thick accumulation of Pandara, suggesting a post-min movement that preserved Emmy Bluff and Oak Dam West. The section shows the interpreted connection between the postulated OME marker and the collapse of ferruginous sediments and conglomerates into the hematitic IOCG breccias from the paleosurface on the caldera shoulder. Of interest are the logs of a transition from the deposit up into the Pandara, which I will come back to later. Also, OzMineral reports inclusions of volcanogenic quartz conglomerate deep within most of their deposits. The best fit to these data is a unifying super caldera model. This concept was proposed in 2016 after the first precise dates were released for the GRV. Early Hiltaba granites were in place prior to the caldera collapse, while the Uno fault margin has the even earlier St. Peter subduction granodiorite. A rapid change to extension triggered the caldera collapse and OME. Mineralizing dikes and cupolas telescoped into the caldera shoulders. The postulated Mid-GRV stratigraphic marker of the OME is represented as the orange dashed line. IOCGs formed on the northeast shoulder, while epithermal porphyry deposits formed in the prior subduction terrain on the southern shoulder. In plan, the OME deposits are closely associated with conductive corridors mapped by the magnetotellurics, MT, at the mantle interface. This adds another ingredient to a possible Tectono-Metallogenic mechanism for the OME. Geochemistry remains a key input, even at the Tectono-Metallogenic scale. After Kathy Stuart left MIM in 1997, I co-funded her Hiltaba study with John Foden. This is my take on some of the results with two parallel belts of crustal source granites. The GRV may be hiding a physical connection, however, other evidence supports the separate belts. Others interpreted a separate central Gawler gold belt, with which I never agreed, and that has been put to bed recently by Justin Gum. Another data set of use is the National NGSA Drainage Survey. This is interpreted in this study as showing South Australia as consistently and nationally anomalous in a number of elements that are considered pathfinders to IOCG systems. Fluorine is shown here. Analysis again showed a pattern of two northwest-oriented belts of anomalous catchments, with the most notable catchment being at Yadnapana. This pattern is consistent with the prior MT corridors at 30 kilometres depth. I declare Austrike holds tenements as a showcase in the Yadnapana catchment. The distribution of fluorite saturation in the Cyro hydrochemistry dataset shows a similar pattern and provides the added bonus of a pre-Adelaide rifting reconstruction that places firstly Broken Hill in the southern belt and secondly extension of the Prominent Hill Olympic Dam IOCG trend in the northern part of the Curnamona. The latter is a refinement of the MT-based model of the IOCG belt proposed by Skiro and co-workers. Putting all these ideas together, I arrived at the following hypothesis for why the OME is so rapid, large and diverse. A double subduction model is proposed for the initial compression stage, corresponding with the first collision of the North Australia plate with the South Australian plate. This produced super metasomatism of the mantle. Broken Hill, whether sedimentary or an Illyrian skarn, is South Australian after all. Early extension produced two parallel belts of anomalous early Hiltaba granites, supported by numerous geochemical and MT patterns and overprinting translithospheric corridors tapping the metal sources. A super caldera collapse triggered the IME, with the release and focusing of fluids and metals into the rapid formation of IOCG deposits in the northern belt and epithermal porphyry deposits in the southern belt as determined by precursor subduction conditioning. Caldera was subsequently infilled by post-OME upper GRV and possibly rift sediments of the Proto-Pandara. Low sulfidation epithermals overprinted the caldera system around 1570 million years. Adelaidean rifting rotated Curnamona anti-clockwise relative to the Gawler. Listening to the discussion after Dave Houston's presentation on convergent margin metallogenic cycles last month, I wondered whether BHTI's or IOCG cycle could apply with exploration openings. Now for a change of pace as we look at what else the Paris discovery has taught us. During a metallurgical study, Scott Halley pointed out the syn mineralite dikes, subsequently dated as OD age, have depleted zirconium characteristic of very prospective metallogenic events. The mineralised breccias in orange show mixing between the higher zirconium over hafnium ratios of the host and lower signature of the rhyolites. This raised the question of whether a mixing model could be applied to measure the degree of hydrothermal alteration in diverse country rocks. There is research support for zirconium depletion in hydrothermally altered zircons, whether magmatic and igneous rocks or multi-provenance in metasedimentary rocks. The opportunity is to have a simple whole rock measurement of alteration. A universal geochemical model is therefore proposed for the IOME, whereby the hydrothermal fluids from the fractionated intrusive sources overprint and change the zircon compositions. This is measurable with modern whole rock analyses. The zircon alteration index was introduced as 40 minus the zirconium over hafnium ratio to achieve a positive alteration scale increasing from 0 to 20. The data from the Geological Survey's 2013 Stuart Shelf study were used to evaluate the ZAI model. The survey undertook an excellent geochemical study of 35 holes. They established a Pathfinder Prospectivity Index, PPI, using an algorithm of 11 classic Pathfinder elements. Analysis of their probability plots show pathfinders like cerium and selenium are dependent on the style and intensity of alteration, whereas the zircon-hosted zirconium and hafnium have much more even and linear distributions across sericite, chlorite and iron oxide altered rocks, and are further down the scale of alteration intensity. The systematics of zirconium and hafnium in zircon therefore offer a more stable platform for whole rock alteration measurement. The ZAI ratio normalizes the zircon variations in hosts into readable downhole profiles, whereas other pathfinders have spiky distributions and lower correlation coefficients, more in keeping with mineralization. Let's have a closer look at the geology of this Winjabi hole. It intersected magnetite-hosted copper mineralization associated with rhyolite dikes. The dikes have ZAIs approaching 20, like at Paris. The altered and mineralized metasediments show a progressive ZAI trend to about 6 near the dikes. This is good support for ZAI as an alteration measure. To Red Lake, the upper GRV and SAR8 that you are going to see today shows 0 ZAI as expected, whereas the prospective host lower GRV shows sporadic positive ZAI values below the marker, then strong ZAI values with the magnetite copper mineralization in the basement. In the less altered hole, 3 kilometres away, the ZAI values in the GRV and basement are lower. A single hole at Chianti also shows low ZAI values in the nominal upper GRV, whereas the marker has elevated ZAIs around 5 with gradual reduction down through the lower GRV and basement. The orderly profile supports the concept of analysing the strato-tectonic profile with ZAI. The interpretation here is that the marker and lower GRV are proximal and lateral to mineralised basement known nearby. The more proximal and downward vectors come from established deposits like Carapatina. Here is the first hole drilled off the main gravity anomaly by a few hundred metres. There is a strong ZAI signature with an increasing downhole trend. The copper and silver values may not have provided much interest. The hole drilled near Kamsim in 1977 is livened up by the ZAIs showing a near and deeper target. Even the Pandara has a strong ZAI and metal values. It is also an example of how a few analyses are needed into the basement to achieve a 2D vector. Emmy Bluff continues to give, with ZAI anomalism in the marker, vectoring towards stronger and deeper ZAIs in the hematite breccia. The overlying Pandara was logged as transitional with the marker here, so the anomalous ZAI values in the Pandara, as at Kamsim, may be primary. This has significant exploration ramifications. The established deposits were used as templates to determine a preliminary target proximity scale for ZAI values and 2D target vectors from the ZAI profiles down the holes. The aim is to have a broader alteration vector rather than solely relying on classic pathfinder elements, gravity anomalies and iron oxide alteration closer to deposits. Holes rated as proximal and shown as orange on the plan are likely to be within 5 kilometres of the centre of a hydrothermal system and possibly as close as 500 metres and therefore are worthy of follow-up. Holes with distal or remote ratings are still useful in guiding target vectors for adjacent holes. An atlas of proximities and vectors to potential targets was prepared for all 35 holes. These include suitable controls of holes with zero ZAI anomalism through the same stratigraphies, indicative of no alteration and therefore no proximal hydrothermal systems or targets. Where possible, the 2D ZAI vectors of single holes were upgraded to 3D vectors by either ZAI analysis of adjacent holes, by location on the caldera margin, or by proximity to magnetotelluric conductors. Of the 8 targets recommended for review, 3 had no 3D assistance. The best targets have MT support, as at Emmy Bluff within the Arcuna gravity complex that includes Oak Dam West. Both have structural fluid conduits mapped by MT pipes and perturbations in the gravity gradient strings. Emmy Bluff Deeps is analogous to Oak Dam West, with historic logs recording what is now interpreted as the upper copper porphyriginous Mars sediments collapsed into the hydrothermal breccia with mineralized flanks. The OME model presented here offers an expanded spectrum of hydrothermal deposit styles rapidly formed by a single tectonic mechanism. Accordingly, target areas can be more precisely selected, with the potential for an expanded exploration space away from perceived IOCG belts. The other concept proposed today is a simpler whole rock pathfinder tool that uses the universal platform of zircon-hosted elements to measure the degree of alteration with more certainty and further out from hydrothermal centres, agnostic to deposit styles. You cannot escape geology in good exploration, so the ZAI numbers gain real meaning when compared with stratigraphy downhole and across holes. This provides a stronger 4D target vector that can prioritise gravity anomalies or encourage detailed MT or other geophysical surveying, both in historic IOCG districts and in new areas with hydrothermal potential. So on to recommendations. Strategic analysis of research questions, opportunities and coordination is an important first step. Hopefully I've thrown up some new ideas today. There are new incentives for a strategic drilling, preferably with techniques that will provide reliable samples for 4-acid ICP analysis. There is a clear need for additional precise dating, with key questions identified and prioritised for such dating. A local lab is desirable and preferable in a commercial environment, as the global porphyry explorers are also requesting in their operating centres. And I wonder whether enough is being done with the existing geochemical datasets, as well as identifying new geochem tactics under the new concepts. I feel the tenement system can limit the testing of innovations in the range of commodities and deposit styles, sizes and depths. This problem is not new, and I acknowledge the ADI and ERA programs. However, maybe there could be more government liaison with tenement holders on ideas and opportunities that are worthy of new partners. And if you think that is difficult, how about getting investors behind innovative mineral exploration? Today has been a timely and rewarding workshop. I have pestered most of the prior speakers over the years and was waiting for their up-to-date research results to prematurely shoot down my presentation. However, I am satisfied the ideas I presented today still stand and are worthy of your consideration. Liz and Claire described data consistent with a 1590 million year trigger for the OME. Mario is on board with the Caldera model. The remaining question is Claire's non-subduction LIP, or LIP, versus the precursor subduction model. The latter is supported by Caroline Tiddy and David Giles, who did not speak today. Either way, the Caldera model and intended targeting outcomes would still hold. In the end of the day, the OME may be so old, large and unique, it does not fit the standard models. Thank you to all my colleagues who contributed to 30 years of exploration and related research in South Australia, and to everyone for listening to these ideas. Cheerio.